Hello everyone, welcome to your SHS course English Language Year 2. Today we'll be studying grammar. In Year 1, you were introduced to the word classes and phrases. In Year 2, I'll be introducing you to clauses. We'll look at the definition of a clause, the elements that constitute a clause, and look at the two major types of clauses. I hope you enjoy the lesson. Now let us go to the classroom. What is a clause? A clause is a grammatical unit. It is made up of a group of words. It has a subject and a predicate. It can form part of a sentence or be on its own. Let us look at this example of a clause. The boys ate the mangoes. Good. If you look at this clause, we said a clause has a subject and a predicate. What is the subject here? The boys. Because it is performing the action of the main verb in the sentence. And what is the predicate? Ate the mangoes. The predicate is from the main verb to the end of it. So we have our subject, the boys, which is a noun phrase. And then we have our predicate. Good. We also said that a clause can be on its own, as we have in the above example, or it can form part of a sentence. So let us look at this example. The boys ate the mangoes because they were hungry. Good. In this example, we have two clauses in a sentence. What is the first clause? We have the boys ate the mangoes. If you look at the second part of the sentence, we have another clause, which is because they were hungry. Why is the second part a clause? We said a clause has a subject and a predicate. The first one is clear. We know the subject and the predicate. What is the subject in the second clause? They. And its predicates were hungry. So you see in this sentence, we have two clauses. The boys ate the mangoes. They were hungry. And this is joined by a conjunction. In Year 1, you learned subordinating conjunctions. It is joined by a subordinating conjunction because. So this is a conjunction. But if we put the sentence into two, we have the first part, which is the boys ate the mangoes. The second part giving us the reason, because they were hungry. So we have two types of clauses here. Later we'll look at the major types of clauses. I hope it is well understood. Okay, so our next objective is to go to the elements that make up a clause. It is made up of a subject. Let us go back and look at our first example again. We said the boys ate the mangoes. So we have the boys, which is the subject. We have ate. It is what? A verb. And then we have another noun phrase, but that is what? An object. So we have subject, a verb, and then an object. So from our examples, we know that the clause is made up of a subject, a verb, an object, but it doesn't end there. It is also made up of adjectives, which we call complements, And it is made up of adverbials as well. We'll take a look at all these, write sentences, and identify these elements in the clause. The boys ate the ripe mangoes yesterday. Good. We said the clause is made up of a subject, a verb, an object, an adjective or complement, and adverbials. So, what is our subject in this clause? We have the boys as our subject. I'll label it S. We have ate, which is our verb. Okay. Ripe mangoes, we have this, the whole thing is a noun phrase, sorry, but we have an adjective here, which is what? Which is ripe. I'll cut it short, adjective. We have our main object, okay. And then we have our adverb. When did they eat it? Yesterday. We have our adverb. Let us have another example. The man in the house came yesterday. The man in the house came yesterday. What is our subject? We have the man. We have an adjective, which is describing the man. This is an adjectival phrase. Okay, so that is our complement. And then we have a verb, which is came, and then yesterday, which is an adverb. So you see that in the clause, you have a subject, you have an adjective or complement, you have a verb, and then you have an adverb. These are the elements that make up a clause. The subject can be a noun or a noun phrase. For example, I can replace the man with John. Okay. The adjective can be a phrase or an adjective. The verb can be a verb phrase or a verb. For instance, I can say the man in the house is coming, which is a verb phrase. And the adverb can also be an adverb or an adverbial phrase. Good. Now we know the elements that make up the clause. Let us look at the two major types of clauses. So we look at the types of clauses. We said early on that the clause can be on its own or it can be part of a sentence. The clause can be on its own or it can be part of a sentence. So if you pick a simple sentence, the woman is teaching. In this, you have one clause made up of the subject and a predicate. However, if you pick this sentence, the woman is teaching because she wants to impart knowledge. You have two clauses. The woman is teaching, and then because she wants to impart knowledge. So we have two clauses in here. Now, if we look at these two clauses, one can stand on its own to make clear meaning. The other will have to depend on another information to convey meaning. The woman is teaching. You will all agree with me that the meaning is complete and we understand what is being said. However, if we take the second part, which says because she wants to impart knowledge, because she wants to impart knowledge, what happens until you hear the first one? The woman is teaching. So the meaning of the second part of the clause is incomplete until you hear the first part. So the two clauses here, based on that, we have two major clauses, namely the main clause, also called the principal clause, it is also called an independent clause. It is the main clause because it stands on its own to make meaning. We also call it the principal clause. Independent because it does not depend on any information to make meaning. The second part, so our main clause, we have the woman is teaching. The second part, because she wants to impart knowledge. Because she wants to impart knowledge does not convey a complete thought. And so this is what we call the dependent clause, or we also call it the subordinate clause. It is subordinate to the independent clause. So with this, we have two major types of clauses. We have the main clause, and then we have a subordinate clause. And so going back to our example, our second example, the woman is teaching because she wants to impart knowledge. Our main clause is the woman is teaching, and our subordinate clause is because she wants to impart knowledge. Let us look at another example. Amma went to school. Although she was sick. Good. Can you tell me the main clause and the subordinate clause in this sentence? Good. Our main clauses. Amma went to school. And our subordinate clause, although she was sick. So in this, we also have a main clause and the subordinate clause. In some complex sentences, you can have more than 2 subordinate clauses. So we can continue here and say, Amma went to school although she was sick because her parents had traveled. Okay. So here you see we have 2 subordinate clauses. This is our main clause. This is one subordinate clause. And then that is another subordinate clause. I hope it is clear. So these are the 2 major clauses. A main clause and then a subordinate clause. Let us now look at another example of a subordinate clause which is quite different from the first one. So this is another example of a sentence which has 2 clauses, but this type of subordinate clause will be different from what we have seen in the first part. You remember in year 1, you studied relative pronouns. So we are going to write 2 sentences, join them with a relative pronoun. But when we do that, one becomes subordinate to the other. So we extract the main clause and then know which one is the subordinate clause. Okay, let us look at another example of a main clause and a subordinate clause. In year 1, you learned relative pronouns. You learned that we join sentences with relative pronouns. So we are going to do that and then extract the main clause in the sentence from the subordinate clauses. Look at this sentence. John bought a pen for Ya. Ya is John's sister. Good. Now we are going to join this with the relative pronoun who. I believe the obvious sentence we'll write is that John bought a pen for Ya, who is his sister. In this sentence, we have 2 clauses because here we join the clauses with who, which is a relative pronoun. So we have our first clause, which is John bought a pen for Ya. And then the second clause, we said what? Ya is John's sister. So we have joined and then we have used who. This who represents Ya. So here we have Ya is John's sister. And then John bought a pen for Ya. So we have 2 clauses here. And we have the relative pronoun representing Ya. What is the main clause? We said the main clause always makes a complete thought. It conveys a complete thought. So we have John bought a pen for Ya. We all understand that. And then who is his sister? This is not a question. So the meaning is incomplete until it is linked to the main clause, which is John bought a pen for Ya. So here, our main clause is John bought a pen for Ya. And then our subordinate clause is who is his sister. So we have two clauses. John bought a pen for Ya, our main clause. Who is his sister? Our subordinate clause. Because who is his sister is not a question, so we don't get the meaning until we hear it is linked to the first part. Let us have another example of this, using another relative pronoun. The book that I bought is a novel. Let us extract our main clause. The book that I bought is a novel. If you want to extract the two clauses, we know there are two ideas here. The book is a novel. And then, so we have it here, in between that I bought. You may be asking why that I bought is a clause. You remember we said the clause has a subject and a predicate, right? That represents the book. You should always have that in mind. So the book I bought, it makes a complete thought. Okay? The book I bought. And then the book is a novel. It has a subject and then it has a predicate. Let us have another example. Using which. The house which got burnt was mine. What are the two main clauses here? Once again, we have the house was mine. And then we have which got burnt. So, this is our main clause. It makes a complete thought. Which got burnt is not a question, so the meaning is not complete. But it's a clause because which represents the house. So if you replace that, what do you have? The house got burnt. It has a subject and a predicate. So whenever you use relative pronouns and you have a complete sentence, you should know that it contains two clauses. As we saw early on, we had our two sentences. John bought a pen for Ya, and then Ya is John's sister. So all these sentences contain two clauses. Okay, so we'll look at another type of example. This time, the subordinate clause you see is also different from the second and the first. Let us see this example. He said that his answer was correct. We have another clause or another sentence here. He said that his answer was correct. He said something, and what is that something? That his answer was correct. Remember, you only need a subject and a verb to form a sentence. So, our main clause is he said. What he said, we can replace that with it. we can replace that with it. He said it. And the second part, which says that his answer was correct. We also have another clause because there's a subject here and there's a predicate, joined by that. And that is what makes the meaning incomplete. That his answer was correct. That his answer was correct. The meaning is incomplete until you link it to the main clause. So the subordinate clause here is that his answer was correct. That his answer was correct. Let us have another example. I understood what she taught. I understood what she taught. Once again, we have two clauses here. We have I understood. It makes a complete thought. What she taught. What she taught. What has it done? So it is incomplete. We don't get the meaning until it is linked to the main clause, which is I understood. So I understood is our main clause. What I understood can be replaced with it. And our subordinate clause, what she taught. And you know, it is a clause. It has a subject and then it has a verb linked by that. What? A final example of this type of subordinate clause. We know where she lives. We know where she lives. So once again, our main clause, we know. And what we know it. And then our subordinate clause, where she lives. So we have been learning about clauses. We defined a clause. We also studied the elements that constitute a clause. We said a clause is made up of a subject, a verb, an object, a complement, which are either adjectivals or nominals, and then adverbials. We have also studied two major types of clauses, the main clause and the subordinate clause. The main clause can stand on its own to make meaning, and the subordinate clause is dependent on the main clause to convey meaning. I hope you enjoyed our lesson. In our next lesson, we'll be looking at the types of subordinate clauses. We have already given examples in the subordinate clauses we identified in our sentences, but we'll go on to learn further about them. See you next time. Goodbye.